Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Circle. Or just hearing the words of one concerned individual about the way that things are going in the world today. What I'd like to do today is start off by giving you a reading from two readings. One is from the scripture One Buddhism, number 48. From the Discourses of the Great Master on Moral Practice. The Great Master said, as students in the school have tests at the end of each term, those of moral training, when they are to be elevated in their low ranks to attain Buddhahood, must pass various tests which are presented to them through favorable or adverse trial situations. Therefore, when Buddha was attaining Buddhahood, the evil one, Papillon, attacked Buddha with his countless wicked subordinates. After this, many others of moral training also faced such trials. According to my observation, some of you have been given a test and are still fighting hard against it. Some are defeated by the tasks, leading themselves to eternal destruction. Some are having a promising life by passing the test with satisfactory accomplishments. Each of you reflect on your own area of study and do your best not to fail the test. The next reading is one that is really touching to me, one that we read all of the time. It's part of the Heart Sutra. Let me see. Alright, I'll just be reading part of this. Form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. The same is true of sensations, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. They do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no sensation, no perceptions, no impulses, no consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind. No realm of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness. No ignorance, nor extinction of ignorance. No old age and death, nor extinction of them. No suffering, nor origination of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, and also no attainment, with nothing to gain. The reason I am speaking from these two readings is because I think that all of us are engaged in one of the greatest tests in our lives as we find ourselves living during these troubling times in this world, the one we find ourselves in right now. The major test I'm talking about right now is something that is almost invisible. The test is a struggle against two things. One is the competitiveness that we find in our society, which is the need to be better than someone, at least anyone. And the other is the dualism that we find in our society, where we find that we either have to be right or wrong. Things have to be up or down, right or left. We have to be able to speak about things and talk about them with certainty, or we find that we have less worth and value than other people. As we have these two things interwoven together, we find that we always struggle against ourselves, trying to find answers for things that don't have answers. And by doing this, sometimes we err and we find ourselves still trapped in Maya, or illusion. One of the names for Maya, or one of the definitions of Maya, is illusion. Another is to compare. So it is basically being trapped in an illusion where we are always comparing ourselves to others, or our dharma to others, or we're comparing right to left, up to down, always judging about life instead of living the fullness of life. And that the one-pointedness of the original mind that lies beyond this dualism So our greatest task in this society, the one that pushes dualism as what is normal and performance as that which is good, is to break away from that. We see it on television every day. We hear it. Our language is created in order to compare and contrast things. Everything around us in this world is geared to keep us in the world of dualism and illusion. And this is the biggest test, because it takes a great measure of faith to break free of this illusion of dualism. I would like to give you a couple of examples of how this illusion has actually shaped a lot of various religions and philosophies throughout time. Then I would like to talk about the way it is actually just beginning to shape the religions and philosophies in the East right now. First, I'll discuss Christianity, because I've studied a lot about Christianity. There was a Catholic priest who was a theologian named John Knitter, who wrote a book called No Other Name. The question he posed was, is there any other name by which one can be saved besides Jesus? It was about a 200 or 300 page book. Considering who wrote it, I thought I knew the answer. When I began to read, I was shocked to see that he said, yes, there is another name by which we can be saved. He went through the Bible history, theological history, and discourses, and he looked at Jesus has changed throughout the history of the church. First, you had the Jesus that started out as a great prophet. In fact, in the early Christian church, when Christianity was first born, even before it was called Christianity, it was a sect of Judaism, because he was seen as a prophet. As time went on, Jesus became the Son of God, and finally the only Son of God, because according to Knitter, in the West, people needed to have the best God. You see, if Jesus was just a Son of God, then he was equal to everyone else, all the other sons of God. But it wasn't good enough to the West to be equal, because in the dualistic world, we just have better or not. So what was happening in the world was that people were being influenced by the dualism and competitiveness. So as time went on, the whole image of Jesus was changing. So you had the Jesus who was Son of God, and then the only Son of God, and then that wasn't good enough, because there were many sons of God, so he had to become God, because there was nothing higher than God. But then we had a problem with the Trinity. It was a monotheistic religion, so one of the great thinkers in Africa came up with the Trinity based on some of the Egyptian theology. So Jesus can be called God and not God at the same time. You can have one God, who is Jesus now, but many gods, and no one can be better than this prophet that is God. It took many generations for all of this to happen, but what slowly happened with this was that the idea of dualism and competitiveness slowly crept into the religion and became what we have today. During the Inquisition, when people started to question this idea of three and one and the Trinity, they were actually persecuted and killed for it. They were told it was the great mystery, and they could not question it and try to understand it. The ones who did were called heretics, which actually meant those who are able to choose, those who were intelligent enough to discuss what happened and choose what they wanted to believe. Millions of them were murdered during the Dark Ages because they dared to choose. And this was the place where you saw the power of the institution creating something and then using blatant power of violence to make people enforce that belief and hold on to it. After several generations, people began to believe that belief on their own and not question it anymore. You can see the same thing happening today with science. Science came out during a time at the end of the Dark Ages when it was supposed to break free of this influence of dualism and influence of the church. When science first started to grow, they understood that there were four ways of learning. One way was by tradition. They looked at the things that worked in the past and traditional behaviors and what worked, and said you could learn by what worked, by following tradition. Another way was by abstraction. you could actually sit down and figure out what's going on logically and come up with a true answer. The third way was experimentation, where one did experiments to find answers. The fourth way was by intuition, where one would learn to look at the world and by some magical way almost one would understand with a deeper understanding. What slowly happened to science was that the other ways of understanding were pushed out because they were looking for the one best way once again. And so we ended up with a science that is mostly based on experimentation and research. Since that time, either the research has gotten more strict, now you need more people, more money, and more funding to do the research, and now things are not valued if the wrong scientist happens to discover them. So we find, again, how this idea of dualism and competition has tainted the very science that wanted to get rid of the dualism. So nowadays we find ourselves with the political influence science, where people tell us what we should believe according to who is funding them, or according to how big they are, or what their name is. And people actually are getting pushed out of the scientific community if they have a finding that stands out against what most people say. The last thing I see this effect on is philosophy and Eastern religions now. It's not that heavy yet, but it is on the way. I can see the fringes of dualism creeping into Eastern religion as many people go to the West, go to the East and study a lot and come back with thoughts and ideas, and in order to explain them to the Western psyche in an easy way, they explain it in a dualistic mode. And as they explain it in a dualistic way, what happens is that the aim of the religion is lost. The aim is to bring us to one-pointed thinking, to bring us to singular thinking. The aim of meditation is to still the mind, to quiet the mind, to come to the one point of original mind in order to understand who and what we are. Nowadays there are even teachers who are going around the world saying that meditation should be easy and comfortable for everyone, and they are saying that there is no need whatsoever to silence the mind. One doesn't have to do that. The object of every type of mysticism, though, prayer, chanting, meditation, contemplative prayer, all of those things have always been to bring the mind to one single point and still the mind. Nowadays, people are saying that you can just look at the thoughts as they come up, period. Or you can just chant. So what they are looking at is the tool to move towards the oneness and seeing that as the object of the meditation instead of the oneness, which is the tool to move us to real meditation. Meditation is to move us towards this one point in mind in order to stop the chatter of the mind so that it will dissolve, so that we will be able to experience the greater essence beyond all of the thought, so that we will be able to experience the original mind, the Buddha within. And remember that we are that, not separate from that. But if we just sit and think and watch the words, we can watch that for 30, 40, 50 years and never attain the goal. The goal is to realize who and what we are and to get rid of the dualism. And this comes because in the ego we have thoughts and ideas and feelings that we have been socialized to believe in. A lot of our psychologists in the past talked about this. There were psychologists called the behaviorists. What they said was that all thought was nothing but a series of firing glands and repetitions. These glands fired, and if one got positive reinforcement, they would fire more. If they got negative reinforcements, they fire less. It was very popular for a while until people realized that there was more to the human being than that. Then cognitive behavioralism came about because they realized that people had a mind and there was something more than glands firing. As I look at the ego, I see the ego as what the behaviorists talked about, just firing glands and thoughts and ideas. But the essence of the human being, the original mind, is that